I never expected my own son to put a price tag on my life, let alone one that was cheaper than a kitchen remodel. The dining room felt unusually cold that Tuesday evening. I sat across from David and his wife Sarah, a heavy folder of medical documents resting under my hands. I had just explained the reality of my situation, a tangled cluster of blood vessels in my brain, a ticking time bomb that required immediate specialized surgery. It was a complex procedure, and it would cost $40,000 out of pocket. Sarah crossed her arms immediately, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently against her elbows. David stared blankly at his plate, actively avoiding my eyes. That $40,000 was currently sitting in my joint savings account. It was my money, meticulously saved over 30 years of teaching, but casually earmarked by David and Sarah for her new boutique catering business and their dream kitchen renovation. Mom, this is incredibly sudden, David mumbled, pushing his peas around with his fork. Illness usually is, I replied, keeping my voice perfectly steady. I need to schedule the procedure for next week. I'll be withdrawing the funds tomorrow morning. Sarah scoffed loudly, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling. And what about my kitchen? We already put a non-refundable deposit down for the marble countertops. If you pull that money, the entire business launch is ruined. My life is on the line? Sarah, I stated, watching her reaction carefully. I thought about my late husband, Arthur, and how furious he would have been to witness this conversation. David finally looked up, his face twisted in frustration rather than concern. Look, Mom, Sarah has been planning this launch for a year. You've lived a full, long life. Her business is our future. Honestly, if one of you has to die better, you than my wife. The room went dead silent. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I looked at the boy I had raised, the one I had sacrificed so much for. He didn't look ashamed. He just looked annoyed. I didn't scream. I didn't shed a single tear. I simply gathered my medical files, aligned the edges perfectly, and stood up. I smiled, a tight, cold expression. Thanks for showing me where I stand. The dinner ended quietly, but my mind was already working on a new plan. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of my bedroom, casting long, familiar shadows across the hardwood floor. I woke up at 5, my usual time, but everything felt entirely different. There was no grief paralyzing me in bed, no tears staining my pillow. The crushing weight of David's words had crystallized into something else, overnight, absolute clarity. I walked down to the kitchen to brew my coffee. I looked around at the spacious 4-bedroom suburban home. I paid the rent, the utilities, the groceries. David and Sarah had moved in temporarily 3 years ago to save money for their own place. Somewhere along the line, my home had become their kingdom, and I had been downgraded to the live-in maid who financed their lifestyle. At 7 o'clock, Sarah marched down the stairs, already dressed in her crisp, expensive workout clothes. She didn't offer a morning greeting. She simply dropped her empty protein shaker into the stainless steel sink with a loud clatter. "We need more almond milk," she demanded, not even looking in my direction. "And make sure my gym clothes are in the dryer by noon. I have a meeting at 2. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my black coffee. "I won't be doing the laundry today, Sarah. And you can pick up your own milk on your way home." She stopped dead, turning to glare at me. "Excuse me. What else do you possibly have to do today?" "Many things," I answered, setting my mug down. "None of them involve your laundry." I rinsed my mug, placed it neatly on the drying rack, and walked past her. She huffed, crossing her arms in that familiar, entitled stance. "And David is going to hear about this attitude, Marcia." "We are already stressed enough," she snapped. I paused at the front door, glancing back at her red, indignant face. "He can hear whatever you want to tell him," I replied evenly. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, sealing her complaints inside. I walked toward my car, breathing in the crisp morning air. I realized I had been a guest in my own life for far too long, and it was time to revoke their invitations. My first stop was the local bank branch. I had spent the previous night reviewing my banking app, mapping out every auto draft-linked card and shared expense. I didn't need a lawyer or a complicated legal strategy to fix this mess. I just needed to take back control of my own assets. The teller, a sweet young woman named Jessica who always asked about my garden, greeted me with a warm smile. "I need to make some significant changes to my accounts today." I instructed sliding my ID and debit card across the counter. I systematically removed David as an authorized user on all my checking and savings accounts. Then I transferred the entire balance, including the $40,000 required for my surgery, into a brand new secure solo account. Finally, I canceled the secondary credit cards completely. For the past 3 years, David and Sarah had been using those exact cards for their gas, their endless dining out, and the ridiculously expensive organic groceries Sarah demanded. Jessica typed quickly, processing the multiple requests. "All done, Marcia. The old cards will decline immediately and the new account is active." "Perfect. Thank you, Jessica." I walked out of the bank feeling 10 pounds lighter. I didn't feel guilty. Guilt was a luxury reserved for those who hadn't been told their life was worth less than a kitchen counter. I spent the rest of the morning running errands for myself, picking up comfortable pajamas, slippers, and fresh linens for my upcoming hospital stay. By noon, my phone started buzzing relentlessly in my purse. First, it was a rapid series of texts from David. Then, 3 missed calls from Sarah. I switched the device to silent mode and tossed it onto the passenger seat. I knew exactly what was happening. I pictured Sarah at her boutique fitness studio, confidently trying to buy her $15 post-workout smoothie. I took the scenic route home, enjoying the vibrant autumn leaves along the avenue. They had treated my generosity as an endless, unearned right for years. The real test wouldn't be the bank teller's concerned look. It would be the grocery store checkout line at 5 in the evening. I was in the backyard pruning my rose bushes when the inevitable storm arrived. The back door flew open with such force that it slammed against the siding. Sarah marched onto the patio, her face flushed, with absolute fury, furiously waving a piece of cut plastic in her hand. "My card declined at Whole Foods," she shouted, not caring if the neighbors next door heard her screaming. The cashier looked at me like I was a criminal. I had to leave 2 entire carts of groceries behind. I clipped a dead bloom, placing it gently into my green gardening bucket. That typically happens when an account is closed. "You canceled my card," she gasped, stepping closer, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you insane? How am I supposed to buy food for the house?" "With your own money, Sarah." I answered, keeping my focus securely on the thorns. "My funds are now strictly allocated for my medical expenses and my personal needs. You and David both have full-time jobs." David's car aggressively pulled into the driveway a moment later. He rushed through the side gate to the backyard, alerted by Sarah's frantic text messages. "Mom, what is going on here?" he demanded, standing shoulder to shoulder with his wife. "Sarah is crying." "You cut off our cards. You moved all the savings." "I am securing my surgery, David," I stated, finally dropping my shears and looking at him. "You made it abundantly clear the other night that you wouldn't support it. So I am supporting myself. You can't just do this without talking to us," he yelled, throwing his hands up. "We rely on that money for the launch. You relied on a mother you were willing to sacrifice," I replied quietly. "The bank is closed. The cards are dead. Have a nice evening." I picked up my bucket and walked calmly past them into the house. They thought they could pressure me into reversing the transfer with guilt, but they had no idea what I was doing with the house keys. The tension in the house over the next few days was palpable and thick. Sarah retaliated in the only ways she knew how: petty territorial control. She took over the living room entirely, leaving her catering business supplies and fabric swatches across every available surface. She loudly claimed the main television was theirs and turned the volume up to maximum whenever I tried to sit and read. She was trying to make me feel small and unwelcome in the very home I provided. I didn't argue. I didn't ask her to turn it down or clean up her mess. I simply made a phone call. On Thursday morning, while they were both at the office, a local locksmith arrived at my request. I had him install heavy-duty brass deadbolts on the door to my master bedroom and my home office. I moved all my important documents, my jewelry, my late husband's watch, and my personal keepsakes behind those locked doors. I also unplugged the main Wi-Fi router from the living room and relocated it securely into my office. When they returned home that evening, David immediately noticed the internet network was down. He marched upstairs, stopping dead in his tracks when he saw the shiny new locks. "What is this?" he asked, rattling the brass knob on my office door violently. "Privacy," I answered, stepping out of my bedroom and locking it smoothly behind me. "Where is the router? I have a client Zoom call in 20 minutes. In my office," I explained calmly. "The internet bill is in my name, paid by my account. I'm minimizing my digital footprint to save money for my recovery." Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs, her jaw dropping open. "You locked us out of half the upstairs. You can't do that." "It's my name on the lease, Sarah. I can do whatever I please." I walked past them, heading downstairs to make myself a soothing cup of tea. Sarah glared at the new brass deadbolt, finally understanding that my boundaries were no longer just gentle suggestions. My surgery was scheduled for the following Friday. The specialist warned me that the recovery would take at least 6 weeks of absolute peace, minimal stress, and strict bed rest. Staying in this house with David and Sarah was out of the question. They would undoubtedly expect me to cook and clean up after them the moment I returned from the hospital surgery or not. I drove to a quiet, well-maintained apartment complex a few miles closer to the medical center. Without telling a single soul, I signed a 6-month lease on a ground-floor condo. It was small, bathed in warm, natural light, and most importantly, completely mine. Over the next week, I began the quiet, systematic process of moving. I didn't pack massive cardboard boxes that would draw immediate attention. I bought a dozen heavy black trash bags and casually carried them out to my car every morning, pretending I was gathering old clothes for charity donations. Inside those bags were my favorite books, my winter coats, my essential kitchenware, and my cherished framed photographs. David caught me in the hallway one afternoon carrying a particularly heavy black bag toward the front door. "More donations." He asked, a heavy hint of condescension in his voice. "You're throwing away half your life, Mom." "It's dramatic." Just clearing out the clutter, I smiled lightly. "Making room for new things." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, hurry up. Sarah wants to use that hall closet to store her catering supplies once you're done clearing it out." I nodded, gripping the plastic bag tighter. He was so consumed by his own greed and his wife's demands that he didn't even notice my favorite landscape paintings were missing from the dining room walls. I loaded the bag into my trunk, feeling a profound sense of relief wash over me. David thought my sudden urge to declutter was a sign of giving up, completely blind to the fact that I was moving on. 3 days before my surgery, I stopped restocking the kitchen entirely. The large pantry shelves slowly grew bare, stripped of the expensive snacks they loved. The refrigerator contained absolutely nothing but my prepackaged salads and a single bottle of sparkling water. I also canceled the streaming television services, the premium cable package, and the weekly landscaping service. David confronted me on a Tuesday evening. He opened the refrigerator, stared at the empty glass shelves for a long moment, and slammed the door shut so hard the condiments rattled. "There's no food," he stated, his voice tight with rising anger. "Sarah is exhausted. from working on her launch, and there's absolutely nothing to eat in this house. I sat at the kitchen island, slowly turning the pages of my novel. The grocery store is open until 9 o'clock. You have plenty of time to drive there. We don't have the budget for a massive grocery run right now. Mom Sarah's business took all our cash because you selfishly hoarded the savings. I closed my book and looked at my son. Really looked at him. The entitlement was etched so deeply into his features that I hardly recognized the sweet boy I had raised. I am paying for brain surgery, David. Not a luxury vacation. If you cannot afford to feed yourselves, perhaps Sarah should return those marble countertops. He slammed his hand hard on the counter. You're doing this just to punish us. You're just bitter. I'm not bitter at all, I replied, my voice completely unwavering. I am just no longer your permanent safety net. You are a married man. It is time you provided for your own household. I picked up my book and walked toward the stairs. He stood in the kitchen, completely paralyzed by the reality of having to fend for himself. He crumpled a faded takeout menu in his hand, but the true cost of his arrogance hadn't even hit his bank account yet. The morning of my procedure arrived with a quiet, heavy dawn. David and Sarah were already gone. They had packed their bags the night before for a weekend getaway using a high-interest credit card they had desperately opened just to escape the toxic energy of the house. They didn't wish me luck on the surgery. They didn't even bother to say goodbye. The moment their car disappeared down the street, I made my final move. I called the local moving company I had hired days in advance. 4 strong, efficient men arrived within the hour. Everything in the master bedroom, the office, and the patio I directed. Leave the guest room exactly as it is. They worked with incredible speed. They wrapped my vintage armchairs in plastic and carefully carried out my heavy wooden bed frame. Within 2 hours, all my remaining furniture, my mattress, and my heavy boxes were loaded into the truck. The large house, once filled with my warmth and my memories, felt hollow and echoing. I walked through the empty living room, my footsteps clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. I walked into the kitchen and placed a single piece of paper on the granite island. It was a copy of the lease cancellation notice. I had spoken to the landlord weeks ago. My lease officially ended on the last day of the month, exactly 4 days from today. I had paid the final rent, but the utilities would automatically be shut off by Monday morning. The movers handed me the final clipboard to sign. Take the items directly to the condo address I provided, I instructed the foreman. I have a friend waiting there to let you in. I didn't feel a shred of sadness. I pulled the front door shut, hearing the heavy lock click into place. I walked to my car, ready to drive myself to the hospital, completely unburdened by the past. I had left the keys on the kitchen counter next to that single piece of paper. Their free ride was officially over. I woke up to the steady beeping of a heart monitor and the soft murmur of nurses in the hallway. The sterile smell of alcohol wipes and clean linen filled the small hospital room. The surgery was a complete success. My head throbbed, but my mind was incredibly clear. My neighbor from the new condo complex was sitting in the corner reading a magazine. You did great, Marcia, she whispered, squeezing my hand gently. I nodded gently, asking for my new prepaid phone. I turned the screen on and watched it light up with an avalanche of notifications. There were 47 missed calls from David and dozens of frantic text messages. I opened the first text, sent late Sunday evening. Mom, where is your furniture? Where did you go? An hour later, Mom, the power just went out. Did you forget to pay the bill? Call me back immediately. By Monday morning, panic had fully set in. The landlord just knocked on the door. He said, the lease is over. What is going on? We don't have anywhere to go. You can't just leave us here. The messages became increasingly desperate. Sarah is crying. Mom, we can't afford the deposit on a new place. Please just answer the phone. We are sorry. Okay, just tell us how to fix this. I stared at that word, sorry. It wasn't an apology for treating my life as disposable. It was an apology for getting caught in the severe consequences of their own actions. They had returned from their expensive weekend retreat to an empty house, no electricity, and a landlord demanding they vacate the premises. The reality of their financial incompetence had finally crashed down upon them. They had spent my money, disrespected my home, and casually discarded my life. Now they were left with the exact amount of support they had offered me. I didn't reply. I simply locked the screen and placed the phone on the tray table. I closed my eyes, letting the pain medication pull me back into a deep, peaceful sleep. They had exactly 4 days to figure out how to pay the landlord or pack their bags. 2 months later, I was sitting by the large window in my new condo, sipping chamomile tea. The autumn rain was tapping gently against the glass, a rhythmic and soothing sound. My recovery had been beautifully uneventful. Without the constant stress of Sarah's demands and David's entitlement, my blood pressure had dropped significantly. My doctor was thrilled with my progress. I heard a sudden quiet knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I recognized the familiar silhouette through the frosted glass. It was David. I opened the door, keeping the heavy chain lock firmly engaged. He looked exhausted. His clothes were wrinkled, and the arrogant, confident posture he usually carried was completely gone. "Mom," he breathed, looking at me through the narrow gap. "Please, let me in. I've been looking for you for weeks." "I'm resting, David," I answered plainly. "We're living in a tiny studio apartment," he blurted out, ignoring my boundary entirely. "Sarah's business failed before it even started because we had to use the deposit money to pay for first and last month's rent on a terrible place. She hates me. We fight every single night. Mom, please, I need you. I need my mom." I looked at him, feeling a dull, distant ache in my chest, but not an ounce of regret. I had loved him deeply, but I loved myself enough to walk away. "You told me that if one of us had to die, it was better me than your wife." I reminded him, my voice soft, but incredibly firm. "You made your choice, David. Now you have to live with it." I was stressed. I didn't mean it. He begged, tears welling in his red eyes. "I forgive you," I replied, truthfully. "But I will not save you." I gently closed the door, sliding the deadbolt into place, shutting out his pleas. I walked back to my comfortable armchair, picked up my warm tea, and watched the rain wash the streets clean. I was finally free.